able to beat the Bulls, because the Bulls, of course, albeit a small sample size, it only allowed 104.5 points per game on average so far this season. Number one scoring defense in the NBA coming into tonight's game. So you would have thought, wow, the Hawks were able to score 123 points, and that should have led to a victory. But like you said, as they started going away from their bread and butter, really feeding it to the post and letting Kristaps Porzingis do his thing, letting Jalen Johnson do his thing, letting Zachary Risacher do his thing, and that team slowly, it was almost like the Bulls baited them into coming outside. And then once they got him outside of that paint, Deshaun, it was a wrap. It was a wrap. And that's why for me, it was disappointing as well, because my take on it was threes in the third were the difference, but they were the difference piggybacking off of your point, which is, had the Hawks stuck to what was working, then you wouldn't have had that they would have had that opportunity in the third quarter to even like slowly, as the Bulls started to kind of take over and slowly mount their comeback, so to speak, that opportunity would not have been there if the Hawks somehow had not been goaded into trying to shoot the lights out in the third quarter. And in that third quarter, hey, Deshaun, they didn't do poorly, if you will. The Hawks shot 43%. But again, it was the fact that they were shooting at such a high clip from the field in the first half. Like, why get goaded into that 3-point shooting, especially when you look at the fact that Chicago is saying, we're not just goading you into 3-point shooting. We're actually nudging you and saying, yeah, go ahead. We dare you. If you make it, fine. But what we won't allow you to do is actually get traction inside. And I do think that that's the thing that's another thing that kind of deaded them tonight. We just did not see the Hawks take advantage of just kind of staying in that space where they were supposed to be, which is they were supposed to be in the space of realizing that at the end of the day, you've got to work with what's working for you, which is, in my opinion, tonight would have been your front court.
I agree with that, Tanitra. And you know what? I think that this was supposed to be a game in which the mentality for this team should have been that they had something to make up, that they had something somewhat to prove. This was supposed to be the game that they were supposed to have against Toronto, against a very equal quality team opponent, like a similar to Toronto, supposed to treat them as such. And that being said, this is supposed to be the clock in, go to work, clock out, get paid, have fun doing it, be efficient doing it, in which they were from a shooting standpoint from the field. In all fairness, we have conversations oftentimes about, ball protection and turning the ball over too much. Didn't have that issue on tonight.
Yeah.
Got a little bit cute in transition, getting out there on the break, at 21 fast break points. But I don't think that Trae Young is taking advantage of some things. I think that there were some instances on last year where we saw him come out of the gate and he was kind of deferring a little bit to his teammates at the beginning, trying to see what he can do, get everybody involved and passing the ball around and all that, which is perfectly fine. But when you got Trae Jones on you and guys that just really can't check you like that, you can't wait until the second half to decide that you want to go in on those guys. Then, by the way, shoot 1 for 10 from 3 or whatever it was. That's totally unacceptable. And he's not the only one, but he definitely has to be one that deserves some of the reasoning behind because of the fact that your deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And then there were some moments where you saw Trae in that third quarter kind of get some traction, and then he was pulled out of the game, and then you saw Chicago go on one of those runs. So it's like 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, because I'm sure at times Quinn Snyder has to make the decision, hey, we need to get some stops, so I'm going to have to switch up this lineup at the same time that Trae's taking a break. But ultimately, in so doing, what do you miss out on? You miss out on him maybe getting a rhythm. And to your point, he has been, as far as we've seen the last several years, where he's kind of playing with a new starting five every single year, he's been taking the time to try to learn those guys, get them involved, find their rhythm. And it's tough when you know that he has the ability to take over, when you just
That's
want to
right.
say, nah, take over,
Just
Trae.
do it. Just do
Yeah,
it.
just go ahead and do. Yeah. But we know that the good thing is you're going to see it, because we saw the transition from Trae being more of a distributor to more of a balanced player as he started learning that starting lineup last year. So I expect that as he starts learning this starting lineup this year, with the addition of, say, Kristaps Porzingis, then we'll see him be more of the aggressive Trae, hopefully sooner rather than later. Now, the turning point tonight reminded us that being basic isn't necessarily a bad thing. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Monarch. So let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth between 401ks, savings, and investments. It's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why you start using Monarch. You have to, because all-in-one personal finance, that kind of tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface, is something that you want, because you can also access it from your laptop or your phone. So think about this. If something can help you organize your accounts, track your spending, get a better handle on your investments, why not? And you don't have a spreadsheet that you have to touch and kind of maintain, that's a good look. And Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand why money's going, where it's going rather, and how to make it work harder for you. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I recently used Game Time to grab seats for a concert, and it couldn't have been simpler. Grabbing those seats in minutes, but I've also used it to grab sporting events, last-minute tickets as well, and it really is a good look. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's new customers getting $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. The Bulls executed the basics better in the third quarter, much better than the Hawks did, Deshaun, and that is why that was the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So, Deshaun, if I look up and down the stat sheet in that also pesky third quarter, it literally almost in every category favors the Chicago Bulls. But I want to walk through it with you, because each one of those aspects of the basics that Chicago executed better, just about every one of them is something that you and I have been talking about for these first four games of the season, right? So when you look, for example, at the field goal percentage, not bad for the Hawks, 54% from the field, except you allow the opponent to shoot 73% from the field.
All of the defense, Tanitra, just seems to have gone completely out of the window at that point. I think there were a lot of instances in the first half where they were just forcing Chicago to make some sloppy passes and things of that nature, where all of a sudden Chicago just starts shooting the ball and it's almost as if they can't miss. I feel
Yeah.
like there were some, it's one thing for it to just be a team's night. It's like, hey, it's their night.
Mhm.
But when you help assist them in it being their night, I think is where I kind of tend to have the issue at. I feel like this was a game where, and I want to give Chicago credit because they shot the ball and they put the ball in the basket. But I feel like the Atlanta Hawks were letting flies in the house, meaning that they were basically allowing a team to stick around. You leave that door open long enough, flies are going to come in. That's just the reality of what it is, and that's just how it goes. And when you're also playing on the road, you can't allow teams like this that are young. You know that they don't have the experience. They know they don't have the experience that you have. You know they don't have the experience, but they're looking for nothing more than to not only continue to remain undefeated, but also to generate some momentum on their side with stringing together some runs and things like that. It appeared to happen easily, kind of like you said in the last segment. It was almost as if they were baiting the Atlanta Hawks. And it I feel like if a team like the Chicago Bulls can do such things, particularly using the Achilles heel of the Atlanta Hawks for the last, I don't know how many seasons we've been talking about the third quarter, Tanitra, being so key for this team. There has been turnover in the front office within that amount of years. There's been recycled players. There's been different coaches. For whatever reason, there's this dark cloud of juju that hangs over the Atlanta Hawks' head, and it's called the third quarter. The Chicago Bulls just happen to be the beneficiaries of it tonight.
Yeah, and it, like you said, it didn't have to be that way because the Hawks got back Kristaps Porzingis. And remember Saturday night, we were talking about Chet Holmgren and all the things that he was able to do because there was no Kristaps. And tonight, we really saw one of those bugaboos for the Hawks from his days with the Magic and Vucevic. He had him in check. Like Nikola Vucevic only scored 2 points in the first quarter, and it was obvious that on the other hand, Kristaps Porzingis was having his way. He scored 8 of the Hawks' first 10 points. Then he scores 10 points in the first quarter. And you're thinking to yourself, this is why you go out and get a Kristaps, right? Because one of these guys who's always been that pesky guy that wouldn't go away for the Hawks, here he is again. And then also you mentioned turnovers. The Hawks were able to turn the Bulls over 4 times in the first 4 minutes. When you begin to go away from those basics of whatever allowed you to turn that ball over 4 times before you even got to the midway point of the first quarter, whatever allowed you to keep Vucevic in check. And I'm not saying that the Hawks would have been able to hold him to like 8 points, meaning 2 points per quarter, like they held him in the first quarter.
Sure.
However, you kind of look at that and you say, but you let him more than double that in the third quarter. But more importantly, he became a part of how the Bulls were able to turn things around in that third quarter because he was able to shoot 2 or 3. And if you go down the line and you see what the rest of them were able to do for that team, you'll see just how much of a difference it made and what the Bulls were able to do. Now, the other piece there is this, another pesky one, Deshaun. And we won't go through the entire stat line because there are about 8 stats and the Bulls won 7 of them. But the one that I got to talk about is the one that I alluded to a moment ago, because Chet Holmgren in that Saturday night game was going off from the perimeter as well as inside. And that to me is more egregious with what we saw tonight. It's that same pesky, petty concern, because in that same third quarter, the Bulls were able to shoot actually amongst all their players, 70% from 3. Why do I mention that? Because if you're going to be, both teams, by the way, shot in the 60s with free throws. Both teams were shooting well from the field. But the basics, if you're not getting the basics over here correct, you got to get something right. 70% shooting from the perimeter from the opponent just can't happen. Can't happen.
No, it can't. And not only that, but Vucevic is one of the very, very few guys that have like true post presence on either side of the ball in terms of bigs. Like it's not like they had an equal amount of bigs as the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks just had better ones. No, like Chicago literally has like what, one? And I know that everybody's, fascination and love with finally having someone with center size like Kristaps Porzingis. What good, I don't know that is doing when you're standing out on the perimeter, and give him credit for the ones that he was making, because in the first quarter he couldn't miss. I think it was like 4 threes in a row or something similar to that. But standing out on the perimeter and shooting threes from the outside is putting you out of position to get rebounds if you're not making that shot. You follow that up by some heat checks. And not only that, but even it was similar to what we saw out of Toronto in that first game, where guys were just getting downhill, bull in the China shop. Don't care if there's a 7'4" guy sitting under there. He's not going to be a threat to protect this basket. And I think that's where we're slowly starting to see. Loving Porzingis for his ability to stretch the floor on the offensive end, but certainly not making anybody second guess going in there on when the Hawks are on the defensive side. So I don't really feel like that's a recipe for success. I'm not sure I really feel like it's a recipe for disaster just yet, but I don't like the direction that it's going, considering two teams feeling really confident to get into the painted area that are not expected to be really good teams in the league this year.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, that's a to be determined, because there were moments where we could see it helping out with, like, we could see that presence helping with Onyeka Okongwu, but there are some areas where, there are some deficiencies. But like we said, the third quarter in particular, yes, was the turning point once again, but it was still just kind of diving into the basics of it. And just like we had said earlier, want to give Robert a shout out, because we called this as kind of our turning point B, which was that stretch where Trae Young was doing his thing. We know he does get his rest, but that's when the Bulls went on a run. And I don't know that I felt like it was a game of catch up. I think we felt like it was a game of catch up for the Hawks pretty much from there almost all the way down the stretch, because that just, it seemed like the Hawks were just swimming like that uphill. It was an uphill battle for them. Like they were just swimming
like quicksand.
Yeah, in quicksand. Yeah. So hopefully they'll kind of reset that and kind of, and again, let me just say this before we wrap up. We still have to be patient though, because one thing we know, Deshaun, for sure, is Quinn Snyder is going to play around with his matchups until he is going to play with his rotation until he sees the rotation that he likes. So I would encourage Hawks fans as well. Like, don't get too frustrated about it in the beginning. If you see like, wow, why was Trae out that long? Or why didn't, Double O get more time? Or just as an example, whatever it is that might frustrate you about the rotation, just remember, once Quinn Snyder figures it out with the rotations, it's going to be a good look. So you just got to be patient with him on that. The Hawks POSTCAST is the #1 place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, head over to Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.